Hello all, my name is Yossi, and today's short lesson is one of several in which I discuss Psalm 22, verse 16. Today we will examine a fragment of that verse from the Dead Sea Scrolls collection. This lesson is dedicated to the memories of my parents, my father and teacher, Avraham Shmuel ben Simcha Bunim, and my mother and teacher, Chana bat Shimon. Psalm 22, verse 16, is another verse that often comes up in my discussions with Christians. I'm told that the psalm is all about Jesus' crucifixion, and that verse 16 is a direct and indisputable reference to Jesus' being nailed to the cross. The KJV, NASB, NIV, JUB, CSB, ESB, and a whole bunch of other English language biblical translations translate Psalm 22, verse 16 something along the lines of, "For dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me, they have pierced my hands and feet." When pushed to explain how or why the Hebrew word ka'ari is translated as pierced, I'm often presented as proof with a fragment from 5/6 HEVPSA from the Dead Sea Scrolls collection, commonly known in Christian circles as the Nahal Hever Fragment. Images like this one appear in many online articles and YouTube videos. In this fragment, the word ka'ari is written with a vav at the end of it instead of a yud, ka'aru. The claim is that ka'aru means pierced, and that while ka'ari does mean like a lion, the rabbis changed the vav to a yud in order to hide this blatantly obvious reference to Jesus' crucifixion. Well, a typical Jewish refutation of this slanderous claim is that ka'aru is a mistake. In addition, Jews further argue that there is no such word as ka'aru in Hebrew. They argue, correctly, that ka'aru appears nowhere in the Tanach, the Hebrew Bible, and indeed, it appears nowhere in Jewish literature. The Christian reply to this is that ka'aru is an alternate spelling of karu without the aleph, which means they opened or they dug. They then morph this into pierced, and voila, proof from the most ancient Jewish writings is born. Well, the problem is that both of these arguments totally ignore one very important thing: the writing style of the scrolls. You see, 2,000 years ago, the vav and the yud were kind of interchangeable. The reader understood whether the written vav or yud was actually a vav or yud from the context. For example, if the word is supposed to be in first person singular, yet it ends with a vav, the reader knew that that vav was really a yud. Okay, first of all, let's look at the Nahal Hever Fragment. As you can see, it's a mess. It's very hard to read, and there's not much text for us to decipher. Still, we will come back to the fragment later. In order to demonstrate what I want to show you, what we need to do is we need to look at a clearer text. And what I did is I randomly chose Psalm 138 from the Great Psalm Scroll for us to examine. There's actually quite a lot to learn from this image. You note that the text that I've circled, this is God's unutterable four-letter name written in Paleo-Hebrew script. This is apparently a Qumranic/Dead Sea Scrolls scribal tradition. Note that circled text in the upper center. You see those dots above and below it? These are erasure markings. This is typical scribal practice in ancient scrolls, both in Hebrew and in Greek. I didn't mark this, but the words with the second person masculine ending, cha, that's kaf he, end with a kaf he and not with a final chaf like we do today. These are not mistakes. This is how scribes wrote back then, and that's the entire point. Okay, all of that's interesting, but that's not the real reason that we're looking at this piece of parchment. What I want you to do is to notice the red arrows. Each arrow in the scroll on the left corresponds to an arrow in the Masoretic text on the right. In every one of these cases, a final vav is used instead of a final yud. Now, not every word that ends in a yud in the Masoretic text on the right ends with a vav in the scroll on the left, but out of 17 words that end with a yud in the Masoretic text of this passage, 10 were written as a vav by the ancient scribe. Now let's take a closer look at that Nahal Hever fragment. As you can see from this image of the fragment, the phenomenon of a final vav instead of a final yud occurs 2 additional times in this fragment as well. In conclusion, the whole ka'ari versus ka'aru, like a lion versus pierced argument, is a waste of time. What's written in the Nahal Hever Fragment is not ka'aru, rather ka'ari, even though what is written at the letter at the end appears to be a vav. It's a yud, certainly according to Qumranic tradition, and the ancient reader knew this very well, and now you know it too. Thank you, Kol Tuv, and God bless.